Yes, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the brand new season of the Rugby Muscle podcast, where we simplify and allow you to actually understand what you're supposed to be doing for your rugby strength and conditioning as best as possible. And today, what we're going to do the first episode of the new season. And I originally was going to completely start from, all right, okay, let's build this whole thing up from the ground up. Like, what should your whole approach be to rugby strength and conditioning? Then I thought about it and I thought, actually, what we should do is take a step back and realize I think it's easier first to identify your errors before we then correct the errors, because sometimes you see things through a certain lens. And these 5 mistakes that I will discuss in today's episode, which is going to be the top 5 mistakes of rugby strength and conditioning, once you see the errors, once you see the lenses that you're seeing something through because it's wrong, then potentially you're a little bit more open to correcting that in whatever way we will build from the ground up. But if you're already viewing stuff through this, I don't want to say it without just going through the list that we've got here, but if you're viewing stuff through a lens that is just wrong, then you're never going to be able to correct it, because you've got to take that lens off, right? So the idea of this podcast is to just make you aware of these mistakes, and they're the top 5 strength and conditioning mistakes because most people make them. I would be surprised if any of you listening to this aren't doing at least one of these mistakes, or even probably 2 of them. Most of you listening will be doing 2 or 3 of these mistakes, and that's okay. That's just the way it is, and it's because of the sort of sphere of strength and conditioning, fitness, wherever it's at as far as rugby goes, and just as far as fitness goes, social media, the state of things going into 2024 is that things are just skewed this way, and I think a lot of this stuff is sort of hurting your own progress. So what we're going to do today is we're going to discuss the top 5 mistakes that I see amateur rugby players make. And I say amateur rugby players because a lot of the time semi-professionals and professionals will have just better guidance and therefore are just less liable to make mistakes. But I still see professionals all the way at the top, the absolute elite level with World Cup winners still make these mistakes. All right, so just because people are performing at their best doesn't mean that their training is a indicator of exactly what you should be doing. We'll get into that actually with this first mistake. So before I do that though, let's just get this out of the way. If you want to work with us, get this out of the way. This is something that I feel like is of very much good value to you if you want to take on our programming, or if you want to be coached. Rugby-muscle.com, and we'll put all the links in the description below. I do think this is the easiest way for you to fast track your way around all these mistakes, around all this education that I'll be giving you over the course of the next year or so with the podcast, to really streamline your progress. You don't have to learn everything. You will be learning stuff, but you'll be learning by implementation, and you'll be learning by making ridiculous progress. So Team Rugby Muscle, Rugby Muscle Elite, and the Rugby Athlete Blueprint, which is free. All links will be in the description below. And if you find this podcast of any use, I noticed that from the intro podcast, got a few more 5-star ratings on Spotify, which is amazing. Thank you so much. If you haven't done that yet, just take the 2 seconds, click the 3 dots on the podcast, give us 5 stars. It really does help promote the show, get it out to more players, which then allows me to dedicate more time to this and indicates that I'm doing a good thing. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, thumbs up always helps. And if you have any questions for a future edition of the podcast, because this is a response to the question, what are the common mistakes you see rugby players make? This is a response to a question. If you want a response in the shape of a podcast to your question, you can either ask it in the comments section on Spotify or in the comments below on YouTube. And of course on YouTube, any comments help the algorithm. Actually on Spotify too. So if you've already done the 5 stars, the comments will also really help out. So without further ado, with that all out of the way, let's get into the mistakes. Mistake number 1, it's really obvious, but it's so common, is just not having a plan. Okay. I think it's not just only not having a plan, but it's also this can go into, we can put blindly copying someone else in this category as well. I just think that this is so fundamental of an issue that, like, with if you're just doing stuff, then you obviously you're not going to optimize your progress. Okay, yes, you can make some progress, particularly over the first year, because you've gone from doing nothing to doing something, but that doesn't mean that you're actually addressing weaknesses. You're actually addressing the things that you need to work on. You're even understanding this process whatsoever, right? And the process of strength and conditioning is figuring out what the physical traits of rugby you want to increase are, or what the physical traits of rugby are in general. Then of those physical traits, what do you want to improve? And then training to elicit a physiological response from the body to then improve. Okay? That shouldn't be too wordy, right? You want the body to perform a certain way, so you're going to train a certain way to allow the body to make those adaptations, to change in that way, to get stronger, faster, fitter, whatever it is, right? And if you don't have a plan for that, you're just doing stuff. And yeah, over time, doing stuff is going to slowly help you improve, again, particularly in that first year, but anything works in that first year. But outside of that, you're just going to you're not going to see progress. And if you don't see continual progress, it's very unmotivating. And if you're not motivated, you're not going to stick to it. And so, like, even if you did stick to it long term, you're not going to get great results, but more likely than not, you're just going to give up anyway after a couple of weeks, couple of months, because you just don't have a plan of action. You're relying on willpower, you're relying on motivation, which is always going to be fleeting. It's never going to be the best solution for you. And if you just don't have a plan, you're not, like, it's why every single thing that you buy from IKEA has the little sheet of, this is how you build this. Because if you just got the parts, for the simple things, you'll be able to potentially put them together. But the more complicated this gets, right, the less likely your success, or your chance of success in building whatever it is that you bought from IKEA is going to be. Now, swap some random cupboard from IKEA with your human body, something that we have been studying for, thousands of years, but really within deep physiological science for, hundreds of years at this point. We've got some really smart people looking into it. Still don't quite understand a lot of it, right? And we're still continually trying to evolve science to understand how to improve. And now you're just trying to just do random stuff and think that it's going to work. It's not. Okay? To elicit a specific response, you need to give your body specific training. It's just as obvious as that. And so I got this error because I thought people were over this. I thought everyone that I would be listening to this would have a really good plan in place, but most people's plan goes to 3 full body sessions, but they don't even keep the same exercises in every single time. They don't keep the same goals, they don't keep the same rep ranges. They're not keeping a log of what they've been doing, and then the next week try to improve upon the previous, or just at least understand what they did in the previous to take it into context. People just turn up to the gym and do random stuff. And if you're going to do that, that's the absolute fundamental mistake. If, you're just never going to, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You're never really going to build anything optimal. And that's just the way it is. I think the number one solution to everyone's problems is have a plan, right? To any problem is, okay, how are we going to solve this problem? You create a plan. And obviously that plan evolves over time. But even then, right, it's there in the first place. And if you're going to get bigger, faster, fitter, stronger, whatever the case is, more athletic, whatever it is for rugby, you need to have a plan. You can't just show up and do random stuff. You need to have a plan. Okay? Mistake number 2 is using plans from other sports. So copying someone else's plan, but more often than not with rugby, this is what I see is using plans from other sports. So people they know that it's a huge mistake, a huge error to not have any plan whatsoever going into the gym. But what they don't understand is that if they want to get stronger, they don't need to be doing a powerlifting program. Powerlifting is a sport. If they want to get fitter and sort of decently athletically conditioned, CrossFit is its own sport with its own specific demands. The specific demands of rugby are very different to that of CrossFit. You don't need to do any WODs for rugby. For the sport of CrossFit, you do. You have to get good at doing WODs. Yes, you can be fit, fast, strong. You're going to develop that, but that's all part of strength and conditioning for CrossFit, for the sport of CrossFit, which is doing the crazy events, that whatever they do, right? If you want to get fitter, is your goal to run 5k, or is running a faster k just a symptom that you're getting fitter, right? So is doing a couch to 5k going to be beneficial for you, following a running program for you as a rugby player, Olympic lifting program? I could go on, right? But these other sports fighters, I've followed myself. I followed MMA programs when I was younger because there just wasn't stuff out there to tell you what to do for rugby. So like all of these mistakes, actually, as I go through them, I've definitely made. And so if you're making them, don't be butthurt at this. Just understand that it is what it is, and these are mistakes that everyone makes. So yeah, plans from other sports. Rugby has its own really specific demands, and those need to be improved and met. This does not mean, and we'll go from here straight into mistake number 3, which is trying to be too specific, too functional, right? So you're not trying to mimic the game of rugby in the gym, right? So we're not going so far that we're doing everything specifically for rugby. We're doing everything for the specific traits that you need for rugby. So if you want to get stronger, right, none of your strength training has to look anything like rugby. As long as as long as you are getting stronger legs, stronger upper body, stronger at pushing, stronger at pulling, those things are going to make you overall a better rugby player. They're going to make you a better scrummager. They're going to make you better in the ruck area, in your collisions, in your carries, and in like your dynamic, grappling situations where you find yourselves in rucks or in mauls. Being stronger overall is going to make you a better rugby player. But that strength does not have to be specific to the powerlifting strength. You don't have to do a barbell back squat. You don't have to do a deadlift or a bench press, both with barbells. In the sport of powerlifting, you do. You could get really strong just by doing reverse lunges, or by doing split squats, or by doing front squats, or by doing leg press. You could do so many different things, and all of these different movements have their own pros and cons for your specific situation. But they're all just tools. They're just tools to get you stronger, and it's up to you to decide which of those tools is the best for you. And maybe it's rotating out the tools every few weeks, or rotating, so you can use all of the different tools at different times and you continually get stronger. But it's got nothing to do with powerlifting. Okay? The sport of powerlifting is something completely different, where you are competing to produce your absolute best 1 rep max lift in the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. And those 3 lifts are their own specific technique. Doing a 1 rep max at those lifts are all a specific technique as well. It's all a specific skill. Your skill of rugby should be practiced in your rugby training. It should be practiced, in its own sessions. But your strength and conditioning, by nature, is going to be general, right? So, of course, from there, that means that there is an argument you can absolutely take things from CrossFit or from Olympic lifting to use as your general strength and conditioning, as some principles to improve your general strength and conditioning. You can take ideas from running plans, right? And some from sprinters plans, from whatever it is. But you're not training for those sports. So always bear that in mind. You're not just going to take the most common one is people love to do 5-3-1, or people love to do 5x5, and these are good methods of periodized strength training, but they're also, if you stick to the program properly, are powerlifting programs, which you're not trying to do. You're not trying to be a better powerlifter. So the plan from the other sport is not going to maximize your ability to play rugby. You could take features from it, but don't get it twisted. Don't think that you have to do 5-3-1. Don't think that you have to do back squats. Don't think that you have to do any formal powerlifting training whatsoever. You might not even have to get stronger. And this is something that is really difficult for people to understand, because they think that strength is everything, and they've spent years getting stronger, getting stronger, getting stronger, and they've built themselves up to get a 220 kilo back squat, let's say, right? And it doesn't matter what position they play at that point. That's strong. That's plenty strong. And from there, they're like, okay, now I want a 225 kilo back squat. The work that it takes to get those 5 kilos on the back squat could be spent doing so many other different things that would improve you as a rugby player. And that's where we're getting our wires crossed with what are we actually trying to achieve in the gym. So I've blended mistake 2, using plans to run with sports, with mistake number 3, which is trying to be too specific and too functional. But I believe there's a better way to digest those mistakes, a better way to understand that. So, right, so you're not using a plan. Number 1, right? Mistake number 1, you're not having a plan. Absolutely no. You cannot go into the gym. You cannot expect to improve your rugby strength and conditioning without having a plan at all. Number 2, you cannot expect to maximize your ability to play rugby if you're following a plan for another sport, such as CrossFit, MMA, wrestling, powerlifting, and bodybuilding. Bodybuilding I didn't even mention, but the same thing, the same process, or the same train of thought that led me to say, okay, if you want to add an extra 5 kilos to a really strong back squat, is the same as adding an extra half an inch to already gigantic arms. Is that really going to be the difference maker for you on the rugby pitch? Probably not. So let's not dedicate so much time to doing that. We can keep it running in the background, but we're not bodybuilders. We're not powerlifters. We're not CrossFitters. We are training for rugby. And then number 3, right, trying to be too specific and too functional is also another thing that is going to hold you back from maximizing your progress, because strength and conditioning for rugby is general by nature. You're just trying to get generally strong, generally more powerful. When we talk about the speed and sprints and other stuff, maybe then we can start to be a little bit more specific. We can add in specific components, but for most people, it's just not necessary. Over specialized training, is so specific that it doesn't really carry over. If you get really good, if you make a machine that allows you to I don't know, I wonder if this is going to be a good example. If you make a real specific machine that just allows you to overload, some sort of specific rucking position, when you're not in that rucking position, are you going to be quite as strong compared to if you just generally got stronger at squats, not just back squats, but squatting, the squatting movement pattern, reverse lunging. You got a really strong lower body. You've developed full body strength, and now you're going into rucks. You're just going to be much better. All of strength and conditioning is general by nature, and particularly for amateur players where you've only got a certain amount of hours per week to dedicate to this, right? You're better off just getting, it doesn't matter what position you play, doesn't matter, your specific abilities, as far as, if you're unfit, you're unfit. If your aerobic system is weak, you're not going to perform to the best of your ability. If you're really fit and if you've got a really strong aerobic system, maybe you even do a sub 25k, right? You're going to be bossing it in whatever position you play, or at least you're going to be giving yourself the absolute maximum potential to be good at everything, because you're not getting flustered because of how unfit you are. Or if you picture that same conversation to be had, but now about getting strong. If you're really strong, you're not going to be overwhelmed in any ruck situation. Doesn't matter what position you play. Yeah? So it's all general. And then number 4, neglecting the aerobic system. This is huge. And this is definitely a mistake that, if we go back, I could have linked that in again to the powerlifters, to people following those programs, or the bodybuilders. Aerobic fitness is probably the overall, outside of, if you've got a decent enough strength base, your aerobic fitness is going to be probably the most important factor in how you play across an 80-minute game of rugby. I've seen people who are ridiculously strong crumble after 10, 15 minutes, and then every now and again come back, but because they're so unfit, they just cannot play anywhere close to their ability. Likewise, I've seen people that are just fit enough, and even for them, they feel like they're out of shape, but they still dominate because their aerobic system's so robust. Like once you've developed a really strong aerobic system, it's going to stick with you as well. That allows them to stay fit. That allows them to continually perform. Even if they do a few dud carries and they get smashed, they're right back on their feet. They're ready to carry again. They're just going to outwork their opposition, and therefore they're going to have a lot of success on the field. And it blows my mind that the vast majority of rugby players that get in contact with me at Rugby Muscle, and maybe it's because of the name Rugby Muscle, they're like, oh cool, this guy's going to teach me how to be massive for rugby. And then they say, okay, I do 4 or 5 sessions in the gym, and then maybe I do 1 conditioning session. And their biggest weakness is their fitness. Or they do 4 or 5 sessions in the gym, no conditioning sessions, but they do 5 to 10 minutes of conditioning at the end. Sorry, but that's not working your aerobic system. You need to treat your aerobic system just as, if not more, important than your hypertrophy, your foundational strength, because most people that have been to the gym and trained consistently well enough for more than a year or 2 years, their biggest area for improvement is nearly always going to be your aerobic system, because you can continually improve your aerobic system, your aerobic capacity, and your aerobic robustness, your fitness for 5+ years, and you're going to continually see gains. And the more gains you see, the more gains that stick around. Whereas strength, say you built yourself up to that 220 kilo back squat, you stop back squatting for a few weeks, all of a sudden that's a 200 kilo back squat. And not that that's going to make you any worse a player, but your squatting ability has dropped off. And so I think most rugby players, and again, this is the 5 biggest mistakes, because it's the 5 most common mistakes that I see all the time. Most rugby players do not treat their aerobic conditioning anywhere near as much of a priority as it should be for rugby. If you have 4 sessions, I'd say not, probably the majority, probably at least 50% or more of the players that I will coach, 2 of those sessions will be completely dedicated to conditioning. Completely. And maybe there will be some fringe speed work in there, or some fringe agility work, or some fringe even hypertrophy in there, or movement work. But those 2, at least 50% of the sessions of 50% of my clients are dedicated towards working on the aerobic system, because it pays that much in dividends. It is that effective for improving your rugby performance, and not just your rugby performance, but your ability to improve. The fitter you get, the more that you can train, the more that you can recover from, the better you can get. And not just in conditioning, in speed, in strength, and all of that. The less training takes out of you. Everything. It's the gift that stops giving. The aerobic system needs to be treated in a higher priority, and it's probably a result of this social media world that we live in, where everything's really visual. You can't visualize how good a person's aerobic system is. There are runners that will run sub 4-hour marathons easily, and they've got a big old belly, and it's just the way it is, right? But you can see by looking at a person, for the most part, absolutely their level of hypertrophy, but also their level of strength. And I think there's something there a lot more visual. But once you get into the groove of things, training the aerobic system is fun, but it is so rewarding as well, as far as your ability to improve in rugby. And with that, number 5, we're on our last biggest strength and conditioning mistake that there is, particularly for amateur rugby players, and that's just lacking long-term consistency. I think what a lot of rugby players do, and just people in general, to be honest, is they'll try to maximize their results in 4 weeks, or even in a single week, or even if we look at it as long-term, 12 weeks. And they do this because they want to get all the results as fast as possible and then go back to living their previous life, which that's not how it works, right? You achieve the result by being the person that achieves a result, and then you keep that result by being the person that lives that life. So trying to circumvent this process and do it as fast as possible and easy as possible it's a fool's errand. You're never going to do it, okay? And that's why so many people just hop on and off the bandwagon, because they make things too hard for themselves to get started. They make things There's that American twang coming in again. They make things way too difficult to get going, and then once they're going, they even if they're staying consistent, then they're like, okay, now I'm staying consistent. Let's make it more difficult. No, you want to stay in the groove of things forever, and theoretically, you can just continually improve at these physical traits for years and years and years, and there should be no reason to decline unless you just change your priorities, which is also fine, but that's an active choice as opposed to getting overwhelmed by life and then dropping it, right? So it's not relying on motivation, it's not relying on short-term goals to get you over the hump. It's not considering it a grind. You should enjoy this process. This should be a process that is fun to you and is meaningful for you, so you don't think that you're losing out by doing it, or you're losing out in other areas. You're doing this because this is your choice, because you want to play better rugby, because you want to enjoy the game more, because you want to be a better athlete. And so trying to squeeze in all the results that you can in a 1 month or a 6 week or a 12 week or even just a 1 week for some people that are really short-sighted period of time just doesn't make sense. You don't have to squeeze every gain that you can every single week, and actually doing so, you're costing yourself long-term progress, because that is just eating away at your ability to continually improve. Okay, perfectionism is not needed here. You just need to be a person that is efficient with their time, that continues going down this way of progress, that continues identifying the areas that you want to improve as an athlete and working on them week on week on week on week. And that's all it takes. And then if you do that for a year, for 2 years, think about how good your results can be then. Think about if you stay consistent, right? Not just for 6 weeks, not just for 12 weeks, but for 4 times that amount to make a year, for 8 times that amount to make 2 years. Oh my God. Then we're talking about like monumental progress. Then we're talking about you being a completely different human, and your ability to play rugby is going to be on a whole other level. And yeah, there'll be, there's going to be plateaus. There's going to be times where it does feel like a bit of a grind, but those things can be days. That's just fleeting feelings that you can get over. And it just becomes a case of reprioritizing, not just in your life as far as, okay, can I, for the next 3 weeks or 3 months, I can only go to the gym twice a week, or I can only train in total for 2.5 hours throughout the whole week, but I'm going to stay consistent because this is who I am now. It's not just a case of prioritizing like your schedule and in your life. It's a case of prioritizing what you need to improve. Okay, I've reached my 200 kilo back squat. Do I still need to keep doing 10 sets of squat a week? No. What do I need to prioritize now? My aerobic capacity or my speed. And I'll do all I need, and I'll maintain all the strength I need to by doing a few sets of reverse lunges a week, and that's it. Okay? So long-term consistency, and we can do a whole other podcast, and we will do a whole other podcast on how to, on probably a lot of these areas, but I wanted to like get the message out there for you guys to understand that these are from all the thousands of rugby players that I've spoken to at this point, these are the common errors that they make before they come into the world of rugby muscle. When I'm first introducing myself to them, or for they're first introducing themselves to me, these are the common traits that I try to correct. Okay, so going back over them. Number 1, not having a plan whatsoever, just doing stuff, never going to be optimal. Using a plan from another sport, it can help because those sports require something, like there are a lot of sports that have a crossover for rugby, but rugby is its own unique sports with its own unique demands, and so you need to treat those demands as the demands, not as other sports. Powerlifting is not strength, or strength is not powerlifting. Aerobic capacity is not rowing, it's not cycling, it's not 5Ks, it's not running. Okay, it's your aerobic capacity. There's many different ways to do it, many different ways to get stronger, more powerful, and you're going to do those through the lens of improving at rugby. Likewise, you don't have to improve when you're in the gym, your goal is to perform better at rugby, but it's not to perform rugby movements in the gym. It's not to be as close to mimicking the game of rugby as possible. It's to get stronger, fitter, faster, bigger, whatever those goals are for you, and will improve your ability to play rugby. You train those traits, and that will allow you to have more potential to play rugby better. But everything in the gym, everything strength and conditioning is going to be generic by nature. Then we're talking about neglecting the aerobic system. Mistake number 4. Like, it's as obvious as it can be. If you're treating your gym routine on a much higher pedestal than your conditioning routine, you've misunderstood what strength and conditioning, what those words actually mean, right? Strength and conditioning. They should be on a level playing field at best. And when conditioning is going to be the biggest factor to help you improve, that should be prioritized. I just don't see that in enough rugby players. And then finally, lacking long-term consistency. I am never impressed by anyone doing anything for 3 weeks or for 2 months. I'm impressed by someone that has goals and continually works on them for months on end. Because I know that's how they're going to get results. If you get amazing results, or if you stay amazingly consistent for a month, or even for 2 months, that's great. But that's not an indicator of success. An indicator of success is not how perfect you can be for a short period of time, but how consistent you can stay for a long period of time, particularly going in the direction, using your goals that you want to achieve as a barometer for what you're supposed to be doing, and continually hacking away at it. Not doing other sports, not having a plan, but continually training with your goals in mind, with a program that is going to continually improve you as a player. And of course, if you want a plan that is designed for rugby players, we've got, I think there's 14 up right now for Team Rugby Muscle, which will be in the links in the description. If you want a custom plan with me to go through it with you, adjusting it week on week on week to make it the best plan possible and a shortcut, as closest thing as there is to a shortcut to improve your rugby performance without all of the guesswork, I am available for one-on-one coaching. The links to apply to that will also be in the description. Or if you just want to fast track your way through learning this whole process, you can apply to join the next edition of the Rugby Athlete Blueprint, also in the description below. If you enjoyed this episode, give it a thumbs up, give us 5 stars on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, type up a quick review. All of those things really do help out. I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you learned a lot from it. We'll dive deep into some more areas of rugby strength and conditioning coming up soon, but for now, that will do us. Thank you very much.